make sure that that program doesn't contain controversial subjects, and you're not impolite to people.
No, definitely not, Dad. You know me. I'm never, ever controversial or impolite.
Yeah. Okay.
Welcome to Conversations with your lovable, never pisses anyone off, ex-Muslim host Aina, keeping it non-controversial. Hello and welcome to episode 40. This episode I've got the wonderful Jon Ronson here with me. What a treat. Someone who needs no introduction. He's recently recorded a podcast called The Butterfly Effect, which I enjoyed immensely. So hopefully we can chat a bit about that. Hi, Jon.
Hey, how are you doing?
I am excellent. Thank you so much for taking the time to be on with me here today.
Oh, that's my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
So the butterfly effect, it's been so fascinating to listen to it that I've listened to it a couple of times and can't stop telling everyone about it.
Right. Well, thank you. It was really fun to make it. I spent like a year on and off with my producer Lena in the San Fernando Valley, just sort of hanging out with porn people, and everybody was so nice, and it was just a really fun, once in a while it's good to do a story where everyone's nice and it's not like a hand grenade going off, which is kind of what my last book felt like, my book about public shaming. So it was nice. And it was very, it's weird. Not you, but a lot of people are so surprised that the porn people in the Butterfly Effect come over as just so, nice and caring and ordinary. And the reason why people are surprised about that, I think, is because so many other people refuse to allow porn people to come over that way in their stories because everybody has an ideology, and it just goes to show when you take ideology out of your storytelling, you can fill it with all these other things like nuance and humanism and compassion. Absolutely, that's so well said. Thank you.
What motivated you to dive into this butterfly effect of online streaming and availability of porn in that way?
Well, I think there was a few things kind of motivated this story. I think probably the very first thing was this little moment that happened when I was writing my public shaming book, So You've Been Publicly Shamed. I was interviewing this Gawker journalist called Sam Biddle, who had recently kind of precipitated the sort of fall of a woman online.
Justine Sacco, right?
Yeah, so she kind of made a mistake by telling this joke that came out a lot worse than she intended. And anyway, I was interviewing Sam Biddle about it, and I asked him how it had felt to have kind of started this onslaught against her, because he retweeted her tweet to his 15,000 followers, and then it was just like a kind of bolt of lightning. She became the worldwide #1 trending topic on Twitter, and he said it felt delicious. And then he said, I know. And then he said something I thought even more interesting, which was, but I'm sure she's fine now. And it just made me think, like, on the internet, we don't want to think about the consequences of our actions. We want to do whatever we want and just not think about it. The internet sort of feels for a lot of people like a sort of zone. So that sort of gave me this like vague idea to do something about consequences on the internet. It's like, wouldn't it be good to do like a whole series which just looks at one consequence leading to another consequence that leads to another consequence, and where would you end up? And so then also when I was writing Shamed, I was meeting this porn star called Princess Donna. She's a producer with kink, I think, primarily. And I was meeting her in the lobby of the Chateau Marmont in Los Angeles, and I was staying there. I don't stay there anymore because I think it's just full of hipster doofuses. But I was staying there, and it's too expensive. But I was staying there that night, and so she came, to meet me in the lobby, and the receptionist phoned me up and said, "Your guest is waiting for you in the lobby." So I went downstairs, and everybody else in the lobby was dressed, in exactly what I'm wearing now, which you can't see, but it's like kind of, a grey hoodie and just, inconspicuous. And except for Donna, who looked like this kind of, peacock.
I remember that part you described it really well.
Yeah, because what happened then was that the hotel receptionist was looking at her with a look of kind of disgust. And it made me think that, some people are only comfortable with porn people when they're safely on their computer screens and not in the actual same room. So I thought, well, why don't I do something about porn and consequences? And then it didn't take me very long then to find my story, which was basically about the consequences of the tech takeover of the porn industry, how all these tech people, who'd never set foot on a porn set, just took over the industry in this kind of coup. And all the money went to them, and all the money went away from the porn people. And so that's what the whole series is about, is what happened. Took over porn.
Yeah, and it's really interesting. Each sort of chapter explores a different aspect of it. And, even though I'm not in the porn industry, you tell it in such a relatable way that you could almost put yourself in those positions. And
right, it's the same story that's been happening in journalism and music, of course. Although fortunately, Netflix, one really positive aspect of one kind of rare positive aspect of the Trump era is that a lot of people are now paying for journalism again. A lot of people thought, we need to fund good investigative journalism. So actually the money's beginning to go back into journalism now. But by and large, tech people just stripped away so many industries, so much culture. And porn, nobody, people sort of think about it in terms of music, but nobody really cares much. And so nobody cares when it's porn, because nobody cares about porn people.
Yeah, they don't really want to think about it. Right. Yeah,
exactly. They have to not care, because if they cared, it would make them feel bad about themselves.
Yeah.
There's this great line from this young woman that I interviewed for the show, for the Butterfly Effect, who was who watched porn, and I asked her, like everybody else, she was like a 12-year-old watching porn on Pornhub, because that's how the world's 12-year-olds. Yeah. Oh, 12. Everyone, every 12-year-old, except for in countries like the countries where you came from, where it's blocked, but in every sort of Western...
believe me, people find their ways.
Right.
They absolutely do.
You got things like Tunnel Bear, right? So you can pretend you're in a different country to the country that you're in.
I mean, even YouTube was blocked in Pakistan for a while, right? They blocked the breast cancer Wikipedia page because breasts are, I don't know, sexual or something. So
right. Wow. But anyway, so I was talking to this girl, and I said, did you ever kind of get so into it that you learned the names of the porn stars, like, there's Stoya? And she said, no, it's like when you kill a deer, you don't name it, because then you can't eat it.
Oh.
So that's the thing. It's like, she had to be incurious. She had to be not curious about porn people. And that's why, the tech people get away with all sorts of improprieties, because nobody cares about porn people.
Yeah. And it's strange because for me personally, like, porn really fascinates and interests me in a sort of intellectual way, but I'm not really like a big time porn consumer in the way that it's intended to be consumed. Mm-hmm. So it's weird. Like I care about porn people and I care about these effects, but I don't really care for porn that much, if that makes any sense.
Right. Why is it just sort of, I don't know, why is it? Because it's just so flat.
It's very, it's it doesn't do much for me. It's very like male oriented, I guess. I would need more backstory, something more realistic.
Right.
So porn just doesn't cut it. But I'm fascinated by porn. I intend on doing like a series of mini interviews with people where we talk about the kind of porn that they consume and sort of how it caricatures human sexuality in the way that it, in the way that it comes up, all the categories, and how you talk about the search engine optimization.
Yes. Well, this just blew me away. So I was on the set of Stepdaughter Cheerleader Orgy, and I had a real kind of epiphany on that set. So, because the director sort of just happened to mention to me, Mike Quasar, that, in the old days when he started doing porn, his films had names like Women of Influence. And now because of Pornhub, because of the tech people, it's all, it's all the fault of the tech people. It's become like a kind of arms race of search engine optimization. So everybody's like fill their porn titles with the most popular keywords, and as a result, of course, the content of the porn films are mutated by this as well. So the reason why he was shooting Stepdaughter Cheerleader Orgy is because those are the three most searched for keywords. And so I said to him, is there, are there people who kind of fall through the cracks, the keyword cracks, because they're just not keyword searchable? And he's like, yes, if you're a 25-year-old adult film actress, you can't get work because you're too old to be a teen and you're too young to be a MILF. Yeah,
that's so strange, and so it's like a purgatory of porn.
I know. I gave this talk, like this sort of hinterland, this sort of fallow years between teen and MILF.
When you're just a regular attractive woman.
Person. Yeah, but a regular attractive woman isn't a category on Pornhub. It's not keyword searchable, so you just can't do it. I gave this talk not long ago in Arkansas at this college, and during the Q&A, the conversation turned to this topic, and I said to the audience, and do you know how old you have to be now to be categorized as a MILF? And like people were shouting out like, 38, 40, and the answer is 29.
Oh my gosh!
I know.
That's depressing.
Isn't it? And isn't this just the internet all over? Like, as the kind of left-leaning political kind of I kind of identify with the 25-year-old adult film actress because, political discourse on Twitter is in its way all, teen and MILF. If you're not a kind of terrifying alt-right lunatic or a kind of, hysterical kind of far left, you just have to like sit there like...
That's a hilarious way of looking at it. I've never thought about it like that before. That's wonderful. So the lens of teen and MILF, I guess, can be applied all over the place.
Yeah, it's the internet. It's like, I think there's something really dark about the fact that every tech billionaire realizes at some point that the way to make money is to identify people's worst instincts and then give it back to them. So, that's how Fabian, who was the kind of brains behind Pornhub, made so much money. And I think Twitter has come to realize that. I mean, they wouldn't have waited 10 years to do anything about abuse if they didn't realize that abuse was making them money. They're never going to ban Trump, They're never going to ban Trump.
Yes, even though he violates the Twitter rules all the time.
Yeah, exactly.
But that would be funny if they did.
I know, wouldn't that be great?
But it's funny because when I heard this woman talking about being on Twitter on your podcast on the Butterfly Effect about how she had to sort of play up the cheerful aspects of her life because from a branding perspective. She was told that it didn't look good because a porn star is like a fantasy and you don't want that to be ruined by like her everyday, I guess, realities.
Yeah. I know a lot of different producers, including producers who I, met and know and like, said that to her. Like, don't complain about not getting enough work. Don't complain about being depressed or lonely in Los Angeles. You're a brand. So I know, awful. There's a parallel universe where there's another Twitter where people are allowed to be themselves. And, that parallel universe is actually our universe in like 2010. That's what Twitter was like in 2010 or 2011. People could just admit shameful secrets about themselves. And it was such a great place. And then it just evolved into this place where everybody has to be like a brand.
Yeah, I've tweeted something about breakfast cereal, just like breakfast cereal, and gotten hate tweets for it.
Right. And the other, at the very beginning of Twitter, I loved the fact that, some of the people I followed had, millions of followers, some had 100 followers, and, all these different lives were coming together on my Twitter feed, and people it wasn't performative at the beginning. People were just talking about that day, some tiny banal slice of life. And I thought that was great. It was a place where you could just relax and be yourself. But that didn't last very long.
Yeah.
People started to be criticized for being banal, and then newspapers would write who were the 10 greatest tweeters, and it became a
contest.
The hierarchy, and
well, and then you see people sort of becoming radicalized, if I can use that word, to achieve that feeling that they get from getting loads of retweets. So they'll say something like edgier and edgier to attract that sort of audience.
Yeah. And of course, some of the stuff that's happening as a result of this is incredibly positive. Just look at the sexual harassment stuff that's been happening the last couple of weeks with Harvey Weinstein and so on.
Yeah.
So there's undoubtedly a very positive side of this, but there's also a complicated and troubling side of it.
Of course, yeah. And that's the type of public shaming that you talk about, which is interesting because there's sort of a whole group of media outlets that have evolved sort of to capitalize on this outraged far left nut job SJW social justice warrior types when it's not that far left or outrageous. So there's people who will use this sort of don't shame people narrative, which is perfectly right in the situations that you described. Like when it happened to Justine, it was completely wrong. Or even the scientist with the Shirtgate incident, that was Matt horrible. Taylor. Yes, Matt Taylor, exactly. Of course, the social justice people can get out of hand, but now there's people saying that they don't want the people that were marching in Charlottesville to face any social consequences, right? So one of the crying Nazi who became, I guess, famous because he was crying in a video, he got booted off a dating website.
That's right.
So then this was perceived as the really bad kind of public shaming, or Bill O'Reilly being talked about. That was then, the far left has gone out of control. So it's strange how this thing is hijacked. This legitimate criticism is hijacked to protect sort of...
Yeah, I've really noticed that. Yes, it's been... you know what? Knowing what we know now about Trump's election, you see all of that starting in the last year of Obama, that things like Justine Sacco were propagandized massively by Breitbart and InfoWars.
Yeah, exactly.
And you're right. Now you've got the situation where the pendulum is just swinging wildly, and those of us who sort of feel, what I think is just obviously right, which is that there's some shaming campaigns which are clearly, appropriate. like shaming the people at Charlottesville, stopping more neo-Nazi marches, shaming, sexual predators in Hollywood and so on. And then there's other ones where, the punishment is like way disproportionate to the crime.
Yeah.
But it's almost like both sides are trying to stop people from taking a nuanced position.
Yes. There's a huge polarization, and sort of the sensible positions are being drowned out right now. That's what it feels like.
Yeah, they're like the 25-year-old adult film actress who's too young to be a teen and too young to be a MILF. That's what's happening.
Yeah, that's so true. We're in that spot where we're not going to be heard until we're MILFs.
Right, I know. I know, it's depressing. And it's sort of made worse by, Trump saying about Charlottesville.
The both sides thing, yeah.
The both sides thing, because now if you say, now if you're even slightly critical of some of the actions of the left, people are like, oh, both sides.
Yeah.
It's like Trump's fucking ruined, he's even ruined that.
Yes. And actually, I'm pretty involved in movement atheism and secular activism. So there's some characters that have sort of come in through the doorway of criticism of Islam, which I'm perfectly happy to do, and when it's legitimate. But when it turns into Muslims are like Nazis, they should be forcefully sterilized, and you should be all deported or whatever, then it's I'm like, I don't know if that's a fair criticism.
Oh, there's such, of course, there's such an obsession with that right now on the alt-right. I personally, I might be wrong about this, but I don't think I'm wrong. Take someone like Alex Jones, who I've known on and off for 20 years. I first spent time with Alex in the late 90s.
I just watched your documentary with him from the 90s today, actually.
Right. Okay, well,
fascinating.
Grove. I know, that was a great adventure, that was. But back then, Alex wasn't Islamophobic, and I don't think kind of Islamophobia crept into InfoWars till, I don't know, sort of 2013, 2014, and then it kind of really shot up when Alex aligned himself with Trump, and look, I could be wrong, and I haven't done total full research on this, but my instinct is that in the relationship between Trump and Alex Jones, Alex makes Trump more conspiratorial and Trump makes Alex more racist. I've tried this out a few times on people who've worked with Alex, and I've said, you've worked with Alex for 15 years, there wasn't anti-Muslim stuff in 2009, 2010, and they were like, no, this is new. It's Alex. I think it's Alex trying to curry favor with Trump.
Mm-hmm. And then there's also Paul Joseph Watson, who tweets white genocide kind of stuff, right? So.
Yeah, he's another one. Paul Joseph Watson is obsessed with Muslims, and and he can't, he just can't see that that's what's happening, and I find it very frustrating. Again, I doubt, and again, I could be wrong. I don't know every tweet that Paul Joseph Watson's written, but I think if you went back to, even 3 or 4 years ago, he wasn't tweeting about Muslims. This is becoming a kind of, a sort of epidemic.
And it's become difficult for people like me that want to push for progress within the Muslim community. So if I'm saying anything critical of Islam, which comes not from a place of hate, but just from a place of wanting to improve things, then I get lost with the extreme anti-Muslim position. So it's very hard to be heard if you want to criticize homophobia in Islam or sexism in Islam in a time where hijabi women are being attacked or whatever. It's very hard to criticize the hijab, for example, or the burqa. Yeah,
and what would happen? If someone like Paul Joseph Watson, heard that you were willing, to be critical about certain, issues within Islam, he or Milo Yiannopoulos or Alex Jones, they would love you. They would love you. They'd embrace you. They'd open their arms to you. But then you would find that you're a pawn in their much worse game.
So this is what's happened, right? So I've actually actively kept that kind of scene away from myself, because I keep criticizing the Western far right and the Islamic far right, so none of them sort of hijack what I'm saying. But there are many people within the ex-Muslim movement who sort of get involved in the Western far right in this way. They start off by saying that, it was so hard for me, which is completely legitimate. They said, I escaped, I did this was horrible. But then they start getting to Breitbart. They start going to the Canadian version of Breitbart, Rebel Media, and saying, there's no place for Islam on the planet, and Muslims must be deconverted, or, then it starts getting worse and worse.
Yeah, and they're making a mistake, sort of aligning themselves with those people, because those people do not have the same nuanced position. This happened to me when I brought out So You've Been Publicly Shamed. I got approached by Milo Yiannopoulos and people like that, saying, could I interview you? And I could easily have said, because this was back before he was, as famous as he is now. Yeah, and I could easily have sort of said yes. I've been invited to be on Breitbart Radio a couple of times, and I've always, obviously, I've always said no, because you don't. If the whole point of your position is that you're not, you're not part of any faction, but they tried. But my point is, they tried to lure me into their world, and I'm very glad that I resisted.
Yeah,
and
because then
everybody does the same.
It doesn't resonate either, right? If you're trying to get the left to hear what you have to say, then if you go on Breitbart and say it, nobody's going to take it seriously. Whereas if you sort of retain that credibility where you're actually not hostile to the left, but you just want to present this criticism, then maybe more people would take it on board.
Well, you'd hope so. Definitely. If I had gone on, Milo Yiannopoulos' podcast, that would have been, so many people on the left would have said, "Aha, I see exactly. We always knew that this is what Jon Ronson was secretly like." And but the fact is that my position is just one of I just want. I'm just, I'm kind of anti-bullying. I'm anti-cruelty, and I'm anti-stigmatizing. Wherever that lies, whether the bullies are on the right or on the left.
And I really appreciate the way that you're able to tell these stories, or even go out and cover extremists in a way and humanize them without sort of sanitizing them. That's a very hard line to walk, but you do it really, really well.
Well, thank you. Thank you. It gets harder when the world gets more and more factional. It's sort of. It gets harder. But
there's so many people that are pretending to do what you do so well, which is just present a story in a journalistic way. But really they are just sort of there to normalize Milo Yiannopoulos or Paul Joseph Watson and say that what he's doing is right. But when challenged on it, they'll be like, but I just want to cover them as a journalist. But this is...
Yeah, yes, absolutely. And of course, everything's, the whole power balance has changed too since
Yes, exactly. Yeah, so a lot of things have changed. But back to the butterfly effect. One of my favorite parts of that was when you go and talk to these custom porn people.
Yes, yeah, that was so sweet. So basically, it turns out that because of the tech takeover of the porn industry, obviously porn people have to make money in other ways, and some, so escorting has gone up a lot in the Valley. But then something more unexpected than that we discovered, which is this world of kind of custom porn, bespoke porn. And that, many professional porn people now are making money by making entire porn films for just one viewer. So if you've got a particular, if you've got a desire to see a particular porn film that's, no one else would ever think of making it, you can now pay porn people to make it just for you, an entire porn film just for one viewer. And once we got in on that world, we were just obsessed. Like I could, to find, just the most unexpected and surprising and, strangely kind of heartfelt bespoke porn films.
Yeah, like you talked about this Norwegian stamp collector, and
yes, this was a man who has spent 40 years amassing an incredibly valuable book of collection of stamps, and his custom porn film is to get naked porn women to destroy his stamps. By stamping on them with heels and then throwing them into a fire while chanting "burn, burn." It's because he was depressed in Norway. We finally got to speak to Stamps Man after a year of constantly emailing him. He finally wore him down and he agreed to talk to us. And basically he was depressed and isolated, and he went to see a psychiatrist, and when he told the psychiatrist that he was a keen stamp collector, the psychiatrist said stamp collecting is a ridiculous hobby.
Sounds so terrible, so unhealthy.
I know. So that's why he started getting porn stars to destroy his stamps.
Yeah, I remember hearing that, and it was just painful for me to I was like, oh, he spent so long collecting it and he wants it destroyed. But I mean, if that's what he wants, that's what he wants.
Yeah. And, he really gave the San Fernando Valley something sort of valuable, which was not only lots of stamps, but a mystery. People were so... I didn't put this in the series, and I don't know why I didn't, because it was so funny. But I was with this custom producer, and I said to her, have you ever had a man ask me to destroy his stamps? And she kind of looked at me and said, are you Stamps Man? Because I'm bespectacled. That's how mysterious Stamps Man was in the Valley. I mean, because all the custom producers, talk. It's a small world, the porn world, and,
right.
And so everybody knew about Stamps Man. So he really bestowed upon the porn world, this valuable thing. He gave them a mystery.
Yeah, it's so fascinating. Even just thinking about what causes certain fetishes to arise in people, The background of that is really fascinating to me.
Yeah, I mean, it's childhood trauma seems to be, a big part of it.
Yeah.
People get kind of trapped in a moment in their
or
life.
Even just something that was comforting, I think I read somewhere as well, like a woman who was into vomit was talking about how her grandmother would stroke her back when she was throwing up, and that was something that she remembered very positively, and now she's into vomit and sex.
Wow. Gosh.
Yeah.
There you go. our inner lives.
Yeah.
That's what I love so much about the custom world, is that it just offers this, this window into people's souls.
Right. Yeah. I mean, when I was in university, I was here in Toronto, and I got into the goth scene, and I went to a few fetish nights. So that was coming from Saudi Arabia. That was really, really interesting to get into this whole different world. I mean, of course, there's a lot of black cloaks in Saudi everywhere, but there was nothing fetishy about them.
Yeah. So tell me, I mean, you've probably talked about this on your podcast a lot, but tell me about that kind of transition from sort of realizing that Islam wasn't for you, and then ending up in a place where it wasn't a part of your life at all.
So because I'm Pakistani origin, but I was raised in Saudi Arabia, we didn't actually mingle with the local Saudis very much, because that's kept very segregated. I think that they somehow view foreigners as bringing, I don't know, Western immorality, or I don't know. They keep the Saudis very separate. So we all had compounds. Not everyone has access to a compound, but I grew up in a very westernized compound, hence the accent, I guess. You know, I went to a British school, and Saudis weren't allowed in my school. They weren't allowed in my compound, which was like a little city. It had its own pool and shops and things. And we could dress however we wanted within the compound, yet we also had to leave every day outside the compound, and that's when we had to wear the abaya, the black cloak, and encounter morality police. And I've seen them hit my mom's ankle with a cane for her headscarf slipping. So, yeah, so I experienced both things. So I actually never was fond of religion. And when I had a Quran teacher come over to read the Quran with me in the afternoons, I'd hop on my bike and like run away from the house, and then my dad would search for me, and sometimes I'd escape it. But, you know, I was never into it. And my parents, they weren't very forceful about religion either. They're not very religious. They're pretty secular.
Mm-hmm. And when you were really young and, you know, so you had to like get dressed up in all these kind of crazy clothes to leave the compound. Could you tell even then that like, as soon as you could get out of this, you would?
Oh, yeah. I mean, one time I started believing in religion briefly was during my O-level exams, and that was only so that I could pray to get better grades or something. But as soon as that was done, I was done.
Right. Yeah, you know, I was exactly the same. In obviously a much less dramatic way, but growing up Jewish, even though we were very liberal Jews, my parents insisted that we went to an Orthodox synagogue, and I don't quite understand why. Yeah, because we weren't like the other Orthodox Jews. But then again, not everyone at the synagogue was like that either. But yeah, I mean, from as young as I can remember, I was thinking like, shit, I'm doing this because I'm 4 and I've got no choice. But, but the minute I have a choice, I'm never going to another synagogue again. And sure enough, that's what happened.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially for mosques being gender segregated, that was something that always made me very like physically angry. Like I could feel my face getting hot from having to enter like a back entrance. So things like that, you know, I knew I wasn't going to last in religion. So when I finally told my parents that I'm not into it, they weren't at all surprised, you know. I hear a lot of stories from less fortunate ex-Muslims whose parents don't support them leaving the faith, and then things can get bad, they can get thrown out. So I'm very sympathetic to that, but that's not been my experience. So I guess I can also see the other side of having like a tolerant, accepting, and loving Muslim family, which is not something that many people talk about. So yeah, but then, you know, when I got into university, I, you know, dyed my hair pink and purple and made giant spikes out of it and wore dog collars, and it kind of went to the other end.
Right. You know, the synagogue I went to as a kid, that was gender segregated as well. The women had to sit up, the girls and the women had to sit upstairs, like further away from the altar, like further from God. And I know, it was so nuts. When I was about 13, I started going to different Jewish clubs, and there was this really orthodox one called the Jewish Lads Brigade, JLB, which was basically like, you know, sort of like being in the Israeli army. And you know, we had to do like training. Not when I say the Israeli army, I mean, it was in Cardiff. But then I discovered this really liberal one called RSY, which is Reformed Synagogue Youth, where, you know, you could smoke, and you could get off with girls, and it was completely different. And so, you know, that was my sort of transition out of Judaism, because RSY was just so cool. I remember
I think it was you were saying to Joe Rogan that you were at a jihadi training camp, I believe, and that's where you chose to assert your Judaism.
Yeah, this was a weird moment. So I spent a year with an Islamic leader, a fundamentalist leader called Omar Bakri Muhammad, who was the head of. He started off in this group called Hizb ut-Tahrir, and then and then he left Hizb ut-Tahrir and formed Al-Muhajirun, which turned out to be, really sort of violent. Lots of men driving vans into people and so on, and suicide bombers, really bad. But I was with Omar. I was filming Omar for a year just after he left his Tahrir and set up Al-Muhajirun, and this was pre 9/11, so there wasn't anywhere near the amount of nobody took them seriously. And he took me to his jihad training camp, which was basically a scout hut near Gatwick Airport, in a place in Britain called Crawley. And that's where he outed me as a Jew. He'd asked me once or twice over the year if I was Jewish, and I can't remember what I said, but I presume I said no, because I just thought, what's the point, but then at the jihad training camp, Omar suddenly announced to everybody in the room, he said, look at me with the infidel John, who is
my gosh.
a Jew. And they all went, ah! And I said, surely it's better to be a Jew than an atheist. And I heard someone in the crowd go, no, it isn't.
That's interesting, actually. That's not what I would expect. I thought atheists were the worst of the worst.
Yeah, me too. But and then they all surrounded me, and I remember clearly, like some of them saying, like, I've never met a Jew before. What's it like to be a Jew? And we were like talking, and it wasn't hostile at all. And then I remember leaving and thinking, maybe I've done some good here. And then, in the years to come, a whole bunch of people who passed through that very scout hut went on to blow themselves up and so on. But it was strange, me sort of asserting, choosing a jihad training camp. Say, actually, I am a Jew.
I can actually really relate to that because, as much as I reject Islam, as much as I've, been angry about it or upset about it in this political climate, when it's so hostile seeming to Muslims or people of Muslim background with talk of registries and things like that, bans, I kind of want to assert my Muslim background as well and say, well, no. Yeah, so I can completely understand that. When you're with people that are hostile to a part of who you are, then...
Yeah, absolutely. And I completely understand why you say that. I mean, the Muslim ban and, the continued efforts to try and implement it in some way or another is... I mean, as far as I'm concerned, it's the single most alarming aspect of the Trump presidency. The way that he got himself elected on the back of anti-Latino and anti-Muslim prejudice. And it's so ridiculous. I mean, the Muslim ban is so pointless. It's so
it doesn't even include like some of the countries where the 9/11 hijackers are from. So.
Because he's got golf clubs there, and nobody can piss off the Saudi government, and it's just pointless. It's pointless and ridiculous. And I think probably the reason why I feel especially, like personally, I feel kind of especially upset about it, I think is twofold. I think firstly, it's because I think Jews and Muslims are temperamentally, in general, very similar. Like I tend to get on really well with Muslims, and I think it's because we just are sort of similar, sort of nebbishy and thoughtful and so on. And also, I'm an immigrant to America. I've been here 5 years, and I came to America with all the privileges possible. I had money, I had all the right papers, and it was still really hard. you know, even with every privilege going for me, I found the transition incredibly hard, and you know, I was really homesick and it was painful, and so, you know, when I compare, you know, that to the way that undocumented immigrants come here, it must be, you know, 1,000 times harder, and they just want to, you know, the DACA kids just want to make a life for themselves, and they work so much. I've met so many, like I give lots of talks at colleges, and I've met, you know, lots of dreamers, and without wanting to sort of generalize, they tend to work much harder than, you know, than people who were born here, because they've got, and they're the ones being punished, you know?
Yeah. Can't say I disagree with any of that. I mean, it is pretty alarming what's happening.
Yeah.
Trump has started like a whole sort of new reality where every day I find myself asking, like, how is this for real? How is this?
Yeah.
I mean, you wrote the psychopath test. I don't want to ask an obvious question, but...
Well, actually, you know what? Well, the psychopath test is kind of a cautionary tale to not diagnose people from a psychopath. But I actually doubt, even saying that, I doubt Donald Trump is a psychopath.
Oh, yeah?
I think, you know, yeah, psychopaths tend to be like empty of emotion. They're like proper high-scoring psychopaths. They're like kind of empty shells.
Oh, yeah, he gets angry at a lot of people.
Yeah, and psychopaths get angry, it's true, but don't you sort of get the sense that Trump's anger comes from, you know, emotional damage as opposed to an absence of emotions?
Yeah, sometimes I do get that sense, but sometimes I feel like he's a cardboard cutout of a human, like operating on, I don't know, just trying to mimic what human emotion is supposed to look like.
Well, that's the kind of definition of a psychopath. But I'm not, you know, as I say, the psychopath test is definitely a cautionary tale to not do that. So,
of course,
but that is the definition of a psychopath. I mean, you know, the way that they sort of mimic. They don't have emotions of their own, so they mimic people's emotions.
Yeah, I mean, other times he just, like, he can't control himself on Twitter, so that's obviously something to think about. It's not empty, it's not devoid of emotion, I think.
Yeah, but it's true that, you know, psychopaths do lash out. Like, they don't have many emotions, but anger and, you know, kind of impulsive anger is an emotion that they have. But they just don't have many other emotions. You know, one of the items on the checklist is shallow affect, you know, and that's kind of what it means.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, I think so.
So do you think that porn moving to streaming platforms was sort of inevitable regardless of Fabian, or?
Yes, I think it would have happened anyway. It may not have happened, you know, Fabian had a particularly, I guess, I don't know if, I mean, ruthless is the word I was like, you know, edging towards, business plan, where he gave the world. Pornhub pre-existed Fabian, but not by more than a few months.
Oh, really? Okay. So he just bought it off someone.
Yeah, he bought it off these two brothers.
Canadian, I believe.
Yeah, but they're Middle Eastern, actually. And yeah, and their parents didn't know that they were running Pornhub. So whenever their parents came to visit them, they had to like shout out a code word and everybody would turn off their computers. And then Fabian bought the company from them and then got this bank loan to expand. And so all these companies, all these like mom and pop porn production companies that were suffering because of Pornhub, you know, he then bought at a cut price. So he kind of gutted the companies, and then, or his business model gutted the companies, and then he went in and bought up the companies at cut price. So he just sort of took over porn, you know, in kind of overnight. And
it's interesting you say that he got like a $360-something million loan. Meanwhile, banks judge porn stars and sometimes don't give them bank accounts.
Yes, it's very difficult. A few different porn people have told me this. It's very difficult to get. It's certainly difficult to get a kind of business checking account if you're a porn performer.
That's so strange in 2017.
I know, right? We've still got, who we should consider reputable and who we should consider disreputable, all wrong. These kind of sweet porn performers who are just doing these little cottage industries, finding it hard to get a bank account, whereas Fabian, got a $362 million loan to build an empire which was based in part on the handling of those women's stolen porn. Because that's because Pornhub is a depository of pirated content.
Right. Yeah. So have they adapted to finding a way? Can they sell these videos up front to Pornhub or something?
Yeah, they've got there's definitely a kind of relationship forming between Pornhub and sort of young up and coming stars. They're making a fraction of what they would have made in the pre-Pornhub days. There's this woman called Janice Griffiths, who's a really big, successful porn star, and Mike Quasar, this director who we became really good friends with, told me that Janice Griffiths came in just because he hates Pornhub, so she came in wearing a Pornhub T-shirt just to annoy him, and she said, I just got a check from Pornhub for $3,000 for because of this sort of affiliate site that she has with Pornhub, and Mike said to her, and how many downloads was that? And she was like, I'm making up these figures, but, she was like 300 million. And Fabian was like, 15 years ago, you've got $50,000 for that. And now you're happy with $2,500 from Pornhub.
Yeah.
So the answer is, they are finding ways to monetize a relationship with Pornhub, but it's a fraction of what they would have made. Mm-hmm. But then again, that's the Apple Music model as well, isn't it? And Spotify.
Yeah, that's so true. Yeah.
I really wish maybe the time will come. If I subscribe to Apple Music, if Apple Music did this thing where they said, you can pay $9.99 a month, or you can pay double that, and all of the extra money goes straight to the artists. Mm-hmm. I would sign up for that, and I'm sure a lot of people would. And maybe one day that's the way it'll turn. Yeah,
maybe. I mean, I think they will find that's just how it happens, right? People learn to survive and adapt. So they will find a way maybe to monetize it more effectively or find another way to make money. I don't know, merchandise or private chats or whatever.
Right. Yeah. Who knows?
Yeah. I mean, piracy in porn, it goes back quite a while. I mean, Pakistan had a huge porn piracy problem. There was a 3-story shopping mall called Rainbow Center that was dedicated to porn, in Pakistan. It was it was an unspoken sort of secret, and women didn't often go in there, from what I recall, and it got raided eventually and shut down. But it's funny to see these hypocrisies in those societies too. Even when Google released those numbers, I think Pakistan was on the top of the list for the most porn searched or something. When there's such restriction around sexuality and even gender segregation, that a lot of people's first encounters with sex is with same-sex encounters just out of necessity, not because of their orientation or even cousins. Unfortunately, that's what.
Right. Actually, my friend Mona Chalabi is doing a big thing on cousins marrying in Islam. Oh. You should talk to Mona. She's so great.
Okay, yeah, definitely. I was watching this video about how video cassettes killed porn theaters. So once they had access to, and it reminded me of your project a little bit, because I imagine when the video cassette was created, then people stopped going to porn theaters. So I guess this is sort of the cycle that these things go through. And this isn't the first time.
Although I think there's a difference with this part of the cycle, which is kind of historically, it's said anyway that historically porn has always been on the forefront of technological changes. So, video cassettes, 16 millimeter and so on. Porn was always there right at the beginning. But that's not the case with the internet. Like, porn dropped the ball when it came to the internet. And YouTube was around, you know, for quite a long time before Pornhub. And that was sort of part of the reason for the downfall, I think. Like there weren't any great tech people in porn. And so when Fabian came along with all of his tech expertise, he just, you know, it was like...
Was able to swoop in.
Yeah, he could just swoop in. It was like there was no one there trying it. All these other people were, you know, they'd kind of got, you know, drunk with their own success. You know, they were making a lot of money from DVDs and you know, paywalls and so on. And they were kind of ignoring YouTube. If they'd been a little bit more forward-thinking, you know, they might have thwarted Fabian.
Yeah, well, they better get on, like, hologram porn now.
Yeah, well, there's VR porn, but that's not going to happen, is it? Nothing's going to come of that.
No.
Do you think?
I don't know.
No. Well, I was at TED this year, and they had this, like, amazing VR thing where you get to, like, be in Ghostbusters, and it was just so great. You know, for the 15 minutes I was doing it, it was just so great. But it still felt like something that you go to, like, Disney World to do, you know, as opposed to something that could really take people out of your life.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, it does feel like that. I've tried it as well, but you never know.
You never know.
But anyways, thank you so much for taking the time to be on here and talk about your really interesting projects.
Thank you. It was really good talking to you. Will you send me the link to the show? Because I'd really love to. I'd love to listen to some of the other ones that you've done.
Awesome. Yeah, I definitely will.
Cool. Hey, well, great talking to you.
You too. Take care.
And you. Bye.
All right. Hope you enjoyed the show. You can find Jon Ronson on Twitter at Jon Ronson, and you can find The Butterfly Effect on Audible. Do check it out. Thanks for listening to another episode of Polite Conversations. You can support this podcast by sharing the shit out of it, making some noise about it, or contributing via Patreon. Patreon.com/Nice Mangoes. No Ian Mangoes. Also, you can follow me on Twitter at Nice Mangoes. If you want to make a one-time donation instead of a monthly Patreon one, you can do so via PayPal, nicemangoes.blog@gmail.com. Remember, no Ian Mangoes. If you've got an interesting story and would potentially like to be a guest, you can email me there too. A special thanks to Dylan Beck for theme music, sound, and production help.